With all the police brutality going on, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about the police brutality that goes on against the deaf and hard of hearing community. There is still a lot of discrimination toward deaf and hard of hearing people today. The laws we have set in place to help us are being broken by schools, places of employment, hospitals, and, you guessed it, police. This police brutality happens to some of us more than others. In Seattle, Washington, a homeless Native American man named John T. Williams was shot to death in the back by police. He had a carving knife that was the size that was allowed by the state government, and he used it to just carve trees. But as he was just walking around minding his own business, police saw him and then they called out to him to attempt to get him to drop his weapon. Of course, he was yelled at from behind. He couldn't hear them due to being profoundly deaf, and the police shot and killed him. In Tacoma, Washington, a black woman named LaShawn White was being attacked in her home and she called 911. The police were notified that White was indeed a deaf woman, and they should have remembered that when they went to her house. Instead, the police arrived. White is absolutely relieved about the fact that somebody has arrived, then she's gonna get help. But instead, when she runs outside, walks outside, the police are yelling at her to stop, thinking that she is the suspect, and they tase her. She was tased, arrested, and refused an interpreter. By the way, that's illegal. In Oklahoma, a black deaf man named Pearson was pulled over for a traffic stop. He did what any normal deaf person would do if they had this object, and that was pull out the deaf sign in the visor and have it, near the window. Deaf was also on his driver's license. But instead of everything being hunky-dory, he was pulled out of his car and beaten very, very badly. They gave him orders that he wasn't able to hear, and they knew that he was deaf, or they should have known that he was deaf because he had the deaf sign out of his visor. But instead he was beaten. He was then arrested, and they never provided him with an interpreter during booking his hospital visit or in jail. In case you forgot, that's still illegal. A YouTuber that I used to watch a few years ago is a deaf man, and he was making a transaction at an ATM. After fiddling with the machine for a while, he felt something was off, and he looks around and he notices that there's a lot of people staring at him. So he just turns around to figure out what could possibly be going on, and there is a security guard or a cop or some sort just standing behind him, and he has his hand on his gun. Turns out the cop was trying to get his attention for some reason and didn't think about the fact that this guy probably didn't hear him. So he risked being shot at. Now this isn't exactly police, but Hannah Cohen in Tennessee was at an airport and was beaten by the TSA. The police wanted to send her back somewhere for some reason, and they were shouting orders that she couldn't comprehend because she is deaf and blind, and this is all because of some sort of tumor that she was currently getting treatment for. So TSA tackled her and beat her, and the photos are just ugh. Alejandro Reyes from California was tackled and choked by a security guard after he left her Forever 21. The security alarm went off. Of course, he couldn't hear the security guard who was walking after him. Thus, the security guard tackled and put him in a chokehold, which is a little excessive for stealing a shirt. Forever 21 did acknowledge that what the guard did was too excessive, wasn't necessary, and they didn't agree with his actions. Donald Williams is a black man from Kansas who was tased in his own home. Neighbors thought they heard gunshots and called 911. Williams was taking a bath in his bathtub without his hearing aids in, because you shouldn't have them near water, and couldn't hear the police knocking on his door. That made the police break into his home and tase him. In Michigan, a black man named Errol Shaw was shot and killed because he couldn't hear commands to put a garden rake down. Police knew that the man was deaf and that he also had some sort of mental disorder that kept him from registering things automatically before approaching him. In Kentucky, Darnell Wicker, a black man, was shot and killed by police. He was holding a knife and a saw, and police ordered him to drop his weapon and shot him at the exact same time, not giving him any time to understand the orders and drop the weapon. And then we have our latest victim, Daniel Kevin Harris. Harris was a man in Charlotte, North Carolina who was shot by a state trooper after leading them on a 7-mile car chase. It was said by witnesses in a light that once Harris got out of the car, he attempted to communicate with the trooper by using sign language, and then the trooper shot him. Body cam footage has yet to be released, so we have yet to know exactly what happened. But FYI, I've seen bigger car chases that ended with a happier ending. There are many victims, but if I told you about every single one of them, this video would be about an hour long. Unfortunately, the more of a minority you are or the more marginalized you are, you have more of a risk of having to experience police brutality. A lot of police brutality against black people has been coming to light a lot more often lately. And if you notice, most of the people that I mentioned in this video are black. There's also a few other people of color mentioned. After 9/11, deaf filmmaker Jade Bryan made a little documentary about 9/11 and asked police how they notify deaf and hard of hearing people when something like this happens. She asked them if they had any proper training or knew how to communicate with us. Most of them said no to both. Now, this was filmed a long time ago, so things may have improved, although according to recent reports, not really. But this is still a huge problem that needs to be addressed. Police and other authorities need to understand that not everybody in the world is going to be able to hear them very well, and we shouldn't be put at risk because of that. If they're actually coming at you with a machine gun, then maybe, okay, and if they're actually shooting bullets at you, okay, I get it. But if we're just standing at the ATM minding our own business and wanting to do a fast cash transaction of $20, we shouldn't be put at risk for that. I will put the link to that below in the info box, so you should definitely check that out. Now, I have a guest speaker for this video. My pal Matt Max decided to drop by and tell his own story. So, here we go. So a few tips to all the cops out there. Hashtag not all cops. We know, that's not the point. 1. Get it in your head that not everybody is going to be able to hear you. You're gonna have some bad apples out there that just don't give a damn, and they're going to want to ignore you, but think about it for a second. If nobody is physically chasing after somebody, think about it. You have time for that. If somebody is just minding their own business at an ATM, you have time to think about that for a second. So if you're talking to them from behind or from the side, chances are they just don't know that you're there. If you came up behind me or beside me, away from my peripheral vision, I am not going to know that you are there talking to me unless you tap me on the shoulder. And I would very much appreciate it if I didn't turn around and see a gun pointed at me. 2. Start caring about the laws. I know this is easier said than done considering previous events, but the law to provide a deaf person who uses sign language and interpreter in hospitals and law enforcement places, etc., is there for a reason. Arresting people who rely on sign language and not giving them an interpreter is breaking the law. There is a bigger chance of causing more trouble by not providing them with an interpreter. Miscommunication gets people killed, as I've explained many times in these situations. And you're just being a jackass. If you want to follow me on all of my social media, links to that will be down below. I have this definitely dope here shirt that was made by my pal and guest speaker, Matt Maxey. So if you want one of those, go check out the Facebook page, which I will also link down below. There's also hats and sweaters and other stuff, so just send him a message and he'll hook you up with that kind of stuff. If you want to support me monthly on Patreon and get some letters and little gifts depending on the perk, and if you just want to help me out with supporting the content, funding the content, link to that will also be down below. Merchandise, so you can get some cool buttons and a print, also down below. I upload every Monday and Thursday unless otherwise stated, and I will see you later. Bye.